everyone. Welcome back to The Strategy of Everything. This episode is The Strategy of Beer. So I sat down with Lisa Watts, who's the co-founder and the CEO of HubTown Brewing in Okotoks, Alberta. Talked a little bit about how her and her husband started the company, their whole journey from kind of hobbyists into, their career and a big career change. So a lot of insights there to dig into. Lisa shared a lot about how she goes about creating the recipes, creating different beers that she knows their audience will drink, and some of the tips and tricks that she shared about how she gets those insights and how she pays such close attention to what her customers are telling her is really great and really applicable to everything that we do in business. So please enjoy, grab yourself an ice cold pint and enjoy The Strategy of Beer with Lisa Watts.
So thanks for taking the time to chat. Really interested in diving in to learn about not just HubTown, but about how you do what you do. So as somebody who started as an amateur beer fan, not a beer fan at first, actually.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit how you got started in this world. How did you go from I don't even like beer to I own a brewing company?
Well, it's a bit of a story. So Mark and I, my husband, we're both science nerds. I'm a chemical engineer. My husband is a geophysicist. Both of us were in oil and gas, and we were watching the ebbs and flows of that industry and understanding, we had 4 kids at home at the time. And we were just saying, one of these days we're going to get laid off. One of these days we're going to get laid off. It's going to happen. So maybe we should just start thinking about what our secondary plan could be, or maybe what our plan is once we're at that age where we're like, okay, we're done with this and let's go do something we enjoy now instead of just something that pays the bills. And we were on a little vacation out in Whitefish and just the two of us, which was spectacular. That's what happens when 4 kids are there. We love them.
We have 4 kids too, so yeah, okay, I know that. I totally get that. Yeah, absolutely.
All of a sudden you have a hand to hold with your partner instead of all the kids, right?
Yeah.
So we went down there to Whitefish and being, trying to have a good time. And I said to Mark, I'm going to be this really fun wife. Watch me. I'm going to take you to a brewery, you lucky guy, because I hate beer. And while we were there, they put out samples of beer in front of us and tried all of these different samples of beer. And that was one of those moments where you go, oh, I didn't know.
Right.
Because beer here, in my opinion, at the time, because of course we grew up with things like, Molson Canadian and MGD and Kokanee, right? With all of the things that tasted to me like beer, what I thought beer really was. And what I didn't know was that there's 80 styles of beer and that they can all have these various flavors. And it was one of those moments where we just went, oh, okay, well, let's look at this and see what this is, and dug into it and realized that the science and the art of brewing beer was really quite addictive.
Mm-hmm.
It was just such a cool concept. It was the first time we did a home brew was really just with our brother-in-law, and he had already been brewing for quite a long time, and he, would make his home brew, and I was just like, beer, I'm not going to drink that. And we sat down and did a brew with him and went, oh, well, this is really, really interesting. At the end of the day, you actually make something that tastes like beer. I never even considered the concept of how to brew it before because I just didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
So we started to dig into that and realized that between the two of us, both of us had this huge interest, huge passion for it, way more interested than I could have imagined. And then I realized that being someone that didn't actually like beer to begin with, that I could maybe come up with concepts that other people like myself would enjoy. So it was just that kind of a weird,
organic kind of folding. As you started out doing it, how did the goals change from we're just brewing for fun to start becoming should we do this for a business and a company? And how did what's the evolution of your end game kind of vision?
Yeah.
From let's try it out to where you are now.
It's my crazy brain. There's no question about it. I've got an entrepreneurial brain. I don't know why. I don't know where it comes from or why it even happened. Even in my world, as an engineer in pipelines, I used to try to come up with things that were different, that maybe could be a new revenue stream for the company. and I was very passionate about it. And usually I would get stifled because that industry is like, here, this is what you do. This is what you do.
Right.
And I'm like, but there's this other thing we could do. So I knew that it was in me. I just didn't know how much it filled my bucket to express those things. So when we started to investigate all of this beer thing, we started to learn how to homebrew. We decided, we started to talk about, well, what's out there? Because we go into a homebrew shop, and at the time, you're just like, I don't know what I want. There's like a million things in here. You can read the internet, it'll tell you what to get. And I looked at it and said, well, these are ugly. I don't want these buckets all over my house, and I don't want it to look gross. And so we started to investigate other things, which was like these smaller brew stations that we could build ourselves, make them look really beautiful, almost like a nice piece in your kitchen. And Mark, being I always call him a hobby woodworker, which is wrong. If he was here, he would correct me and say that he's taken all the courses at SAIT. So he knows what he's doing. But he would make these, we started to make ourselves a brew station, is what we called it. Mm-hmm. And it was made out of walnut, beautiful, beautiful wood. And then we, filled it with all of the supplies that we needed to be able to do the brewing in our kitchen. And so it was basically a package. It made it so much easier. It looked beautiful. You could do small batches, and it was really quite simple, right? It was quite easy to use. And once you start showing that to people, people go, well, I want to try that. I'd like to see I could do that, because that's manageable, right? It's a manageable piece. And of course, in my brain, I think, well, okay, well, we can make you one. Okay, well, we can make this other person one, and that becomes a business, right? Then we started to develop that into, okay, well, now I want to customize it because it's becoming personal for people. Well, I want to buy it from my dad and it's this emotional connection between giving their dad this special gift and him being able to brew beer, which he really liked. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what if we take it up a notch and we engrave everything so that it's all customized? And it has, we were doing people's family crests. Right. The most amazing designs they give us to put on the bottles and to put onto the brew station that became this special piece in their house. Chances are it never even got used. Right. Because, you get these things and they kind of sit in a closet. But this, because it's so beautiful, it probably became a piece of furniture.
At least it's out.
Right. And it became something, right? What we didn't anticipate was going down that path was going to take us into markets. And in the markets, people would tell us, oh, this is so great. I'm going to get it for my uncle or my aunt or my cousin or my brother or my dad. Mm-hmm. But we really needed to brew some beer as well. So could you brew this beer? Because we need it for a wedding, or we need it for, an event for work, or whatever the story was that day. And it happened enough that Mark and I, who had no intentions of opening a brewery, neither of us had ever poured a beer in our lives. We'd never been a server. We didn't even have the slightest clue.
Right.
But we started to consider this idea because you couldn't brew beer commercially and sell it to anyone without licensing.
Right.
The right equipment, location, the whole 9 yards. So we started to work down that path. When we did our initial business, which was selling the brew stations, that was in 2015. And that's when we got incorporated and thought, oh, look at us. Here we go.
We made it.
Yeah. By 2019, we opened the brewery. Okay. So 4 years later, a whole bunch of trying to learn what we're supposed to do and, taking professional brewing classes. We're both brewmasters by our certifications now. If it's actually the intensive brewing science and engineering is what we took, which is of course it's offered by the American Brewers Guild out in Vermont. And so we both understood what we were doing. And all along the way from 2015 through 2019, we were engaging people. We started our social media. We started to teach classes. We started to sell the stations at particular events, teaching them at Valentine's classes. So we had a whole group of people to talk about the product and talk about who we were and show them that this crazy married couple could do something like this. So you guys could do this at home too, kind of thing.
And so how are the goals? What are the goals now? Like, how do you look at it now that it's like, hey, we're brewing, we still love that, but we're not trying to build a company. Like how different is that, the mindset? Because now you have employees, you've got, the whole all of the stuff that comes along with like not just we're brewing for fun anymore.
Oh, for sure. Now, so we are in our 6th year. So we turned 5 in September of 2024. And now our world is about expanding in a way that we can actually pay the bills. So when we started out our business in 2019, what we paid was a fraction of what we paid right now to be in business. For multiple reasons. Of course, all of the changes since the pandemic, the costs have gone astronomically through the roof, whether it's energy, the supplies that we have to use to brew the beer, paying our staff, all of the things that we paid about 40% less of when we first got started is now so much higher. And we're trying to, customize or change our product offerings enough so that we can attract this new demographic, about 30% of the market that no longer wants just beer. Mm-hmm. And they want to maybe think about less alcohol in general. So we're trying to come up with, innovative products that we can put out to the market that will still attract enough people to, again, pay those bills and expand the business. And by expansion, we have lots of ideas, but lots of them are, one in particular was, we've been asked to franchise. People want us to open up more, or I shouldn't say franchise. They want us to open up more locations around, it's been BC and Alberta, between the two provinces. But we keep saying no, because we know how hard it is to manage one location. So managing multiple is not really one of our goals right at the moment. Mm-hmm. For us, it would be more of a franchise model if we could go the path, but our regulators don't allow franchising yet. So
So I want to talk a lot about like actually making the beer as well. I'd like to learn like some of those things. So when you go and you're like, hey, we're screwing around and now we're doing this for real and now we have to sell it. There's got to be a ton of constraints around. Like, so you can't just start brewing things and selling them to people without certifications or approvals. So what were some of those rules? We talk about like the constraints that are placed on whatever it is that you're trying to do, and understanding what those constraints are. Do they have a big impact? Do they have a small impact? Are they hard and fast that we can't get around? Or are they, ones that we can potentially like find ways to skirt around? And so we talk about those, and then also like the people that come into play with all those different things. So whether it's competitors or, legislators or whoever it is that's governing it. So when you start out and you're like, okay, we're going to do this for real now, what were some of the constraints and some of the challenges that you probably didn't know, I would assume, when you first got into it? But if someone was like, hey, I'm going to start brewing beer and selling it, like what are those rules that you kind of got to have to start to play in?
Oh my gosh. If we speak specifically to alcohol, AGLC, the Alberta Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis Commission, or whatever they're called now, those guys do regulate quite tightly, and they still have a lot of kind of archaic rules in place that maybe people just don't pay attention to anymore. And until somebody kind of forces the issue, will stay on the books until it goes away. But there's a lot of rules around, well, it's mainly taxation. So, we had to have the regulator out to measure our tanks and make sure that what we were putting in the tanks could be taxed based on the amount that we were making. And when I say taxed, they do, in liquor, what we didn't know, and I don't know if it exists in other industries because I don't have time to research it, but you're taxed on your production before you sell it. So what we do is we pay for our supplies. We paid, of course, for our location. We pay our taxes, like our property taxes, we buy our equipment, we do all of that. Then we start to make the beer. When the beer is ready, we've paid for the labor, all of those things, the energy. When the beer is ready, we're not allowed to sell it before we pay what they call a markup tax on us. So we pay 10 cents, because we're a small producer. We pay 10 cents a liter for everything we make. So for every 1,500 liters, we pay $150. Before we can even start to try to sell it, which is unfortunate, but it's just a part of, what you have to do in this industry. Then you get to go and sell it, but you have to sell it under different licenses depending on how you're selling it. So in-house, if we sell the beer here, there's a minimum pricing rule. So you can't sell under a particular price, and it evades me right now, but I can look it up later. But there's a minimum pricing per ounce that you have to sell beer at. So there was a time in the past when you could sell a 25-cent draft. Right. You could give a person a full glass of beer for 25 cents. And of course, that doesn't promote the idea of, or it promotes high intoxication, of course, right?
Yeah.
And the AGLC, our regulator, their mandate is to reduce consumption of alcohol. Right. So our regulator does everything in its power to make sure that we don't get people drunk. So we're not legally allowed to let somebody get drunk. So they make that minimum pricing rule so that people have to pay more when they walk through the door and they drink a beer in-house. The other license we have is an off-sales license. And in that case, we could sell our beer for a penny an ounce if we wanted to. Mm-hmm. We could sell it for a penny a can if we wanted to. Of course, we'd be out of business really quickly. But they don't care because people are taking it home and having it at home. And I guess they don't.
So they're allowed to get drunk at home, but they're not allowed to get drunk here.
Yeah. So if you ever think that there's any logic to a lot of the rules, there isn't. The minute you think logically, you just have to step back and go, nope, stop. Mm-mm. But understand that there's lobbyists at play, and we don't really know. We don't have access to lobby for ourselves the way others do.
Right.
We don't have the money for that sort of thing. We're very fortunate to have some local politicians in town that we can reach out to, and we can have some of those big conversations with and say, what is the deal? Like, this just doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's another story, I'm sure. Another rule we didn't know going into it, again, following up with this AGLC's mandate that people are not allowed to be drunk, not allowed to get intoxicated, and that it is actually our responsibility to make sure they don't get intoxicated.
Right.
Is when people start to show signs of it, we have to actually stop serving them.
Right.
We didn't realize the kind of pain that was going to cause, because grown adults like to make their own decisions, and they certainly don't like to be told by our
especially drunk people don't like to be told no. Yeah.
Right.
Funny.
But even the most sober people who have had maybe 2 or 3 drinks that happened in quick succession, mm-hmm. we have to slow them down before we even see the signs, because we're concerned that it's all going to catch up. Yeah. So you've got these people who are barely showing any sign of intoxication because they're maybe bigger, stronger, they have better metabolism, have no idea. And these young are super kind and trying to do the right thing, staff. Say, can I just grab you a glass of water? And it doesn't quite work the way you wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah. And the liability as well. So we lived in Arizona for a couple of years. And so I had a friend who owned a chain of sports bars down there. And so he would always tell me about like the liabilities, like nightmare stories of like, there was one where they were trying to sue them because this person was already drunk, came in, got refused and left, and then crashed a car and killed somebody. And so they were trying to sue them. And he's like, well, we didn't even say, but like they were there. It's like, it makes no sense.
That's exactly. And then on the flip side of that, when you're trying to, follow the rules, then you're also creating animosity from your patrons.
Right.
So the patrons get angry at you and they start to put Google reviews online that say, oh, you go to HubTown and they give you one drink and then they cut you off. Don't go there anymore. And I'm like, oh my God, you're peeing off of our patio. Like you obviously had some more somewhere else, but nobody gets the full story, right? So you kind of get it from both sides. And that was definitely not something we anticipated because, like I said, we never had any access. We never poured a beer. We
wasn't our plan.
We didn't know what we were doing. And we learned along the way, but it was one of those, it was that was one of the challenges.
Yeah, it's probably a million things that you didn't know as you kind of get in. The other thing we talk about a lot is also like risks and opportunities. And so there's different types of risks, different types of opportunities, stuff we can assume might happen. We have to come up with a plan to get around it, stuff we didn't see coming. And then there's like, we call them wild card risks or opportunities. It was like, no one ever could have predicted this.
Yeah.
So when you guys first, like as you've been going through it for the first 5 years here, how do you recognize, for example, you said like, oh, we're going to diversify our products, or, how do you identify like, hey, there's a risk here that we're not going to be able to scale this, so we might need more things, or there's an opportunity, people are asking for it. So how are you guys like kind of processing that as you go through and know, how do you know, like, well, this one's worth pursuing, this one's a waste of time, this one's,
I think it's a mixed bag. I don't think you ever know for sure, but people tell me, and we're really good listeners. So whenever I talk about, people will ask me the question, well, how do you know to do this? How did you know to go this way? How did you know to, why? Where do you come up with all of your crazy ideas? Where's this coming from? And I always say it comes from the people around me because I pay attention. I watch how people are reacting to what's going on around them. If I present a beer, I'm paying attention to, did they enjoy it? I usually, so because I'm the CEO and the brewmaster, so I come up with all the recipes. I don't brew the beer. Mark brews the beer. I just come up with the recipes because I'm looking at the strategy of, I know who our target demographic is and I'm watching what they do. I'm paying attention. And as they show, what their drinking preferences are, I see the aging, as they age, how are they changing their drinking?
Right.
What is it that they're trying to eliminate? Are they trying to eliminate sugar? Are they trying to eliminate alcohol? And how can I find something that fits into where they're moving? Oh my gosh, how many times have I heard lately? Gretzky said at one point, you always go where the puck is. You go where the puck is going to be, I should say.
Right.
And that's exactly what we try to do. We go, okay, I could see this demographic that has either been our major market, our major target market, or maybe it's a sideline of our target market, but it's one that we have to still build into. And I'm going, well, where are you going? Because I'm going to try and find a place to make sure
meet you there.
Yeah, exactly. So when you get there, I'll be there.
So when you go to make a beer, walk me through a little bit of like the process of actually, like you said, you come up with the recipe and all those things, but like, how are you, like, what do you actually need to do? What are the...
I always explain it like, it's like making porridge. So if people have never made beer before, they can understand the idea that you take grain and you take oats and you put water into oats and you'll make your porridge and eat it, right? In our case, you're going to take the grain, crack it open just a slight bit. You're going to add your water. You're going to leave it in there for a while. But instead of soaking up all the water, you're going to actually take that water and you're going to take it, boil it, and add yeast to it. So, and then give the grains away. So slightly the opposite, but the idea being, you're going to take a grain, you could go to your house, take your grains, crack them open, and we're cracking them open because we have to access the sugar, the starch that we're converting into sugar by adding hot water. That hot water then is full of the sugars we need to get alcohol from adding yeast to it, because the yeast eats the sugar and creates alcohol and CO2 as a byproduct. So it's really just taking sugar water, and you could do it with any sugar. If you had potatoes, you can do that. I mean, people know that's how vodka is made often. You can take rice sugar. Anything that's starchy can create a sugar, and that sugar can be converted into alcohol.
And so how do you take it to that next level? Because you guys have a bunch of different kinds of beers, and like you said, you're always trying to like experiment and play with stuff. So like, what is your process when you're approaching those things to kind of like, and then what is the, how do you impact the different beer? Like, it sounds very complicated to me. Like, you're like, oh, you just crack the thing and you put it in the stuff. And you're like, okay, but so how do you come up with those ideas, and then how do you test them out? How do you, where do you even come up with them? Like,
right. So one of the things I think distinguishes us a little bit from some of our competitors, and not to anybody's, there's no negative. It's just a different strategy. But we look at our target market and that demographic, what their palate is and what they prefer. We've been told that some of our beers can be a touch on the sweeter side. That's true. We don't do as many bitter beers. We do that quite intentionally because bitter beers don't sell the way sweet beers sell. And when I say sweet, I don't mean they're cloyingly sweet and you could never drink a second one. I make sure that, we try to make sure that the recipe is playing into even the physiology. Or, we all have there's almost a inborn or in our bodies, we trust sweet more than we trust bitter. So if you're going to go out and eat a berry in the wild, If you ate a bitter one, you'd panic. You'd say, oh, I can't eat those. That's dangerous, right? You're going to eat a sweet berry and you're going to feel like, okay, this is safe. I'm going to eat these. Same thing goes with anything you give a person and their palate. If you tend them a little bit on the sweeter side, people will feel like it's safe, it's better, it's comforting, and it's going to hit that. So we start off with that slightly sweeter palate. We don't do a lot of heavily bitter beers. We do one because there's always a market for that, but it's a small market. And then from there, we build understanding the palates that people are most interested in. So when you look at our best sellers, definitely our bestseller is, at this point, our lagers, because that's beer, and 80% plus of the market of beer drinkers recognize that, right? But anybody that isn't a beer drinker wants something that's slightly more fruity, something that's slightly got a little bit of sweetness in the background and not so much bitterness. And those ones are the ones you'll see are the majority of our recipes. So we'll take our Belgian ales where we use the yeast to kind of produce that sweet background. So the yeast actually produces a sweet background. And then we'll put some fruit on it, like for our berry manly. It's all raspberry. And those two things together give that tart and sweet that people, they love it. That's just that, it's kind of hitting that sweet spot for the palate.
And so how long does it take to go from like, hey, I've got this idea, we're going to do this Belgian wheat with raspberry, and how many times do you have to try different combinations? Or is there a science where you're like, I know exactly how much raspberry to put in this thing?
Definitely not. Trial and error. Totally trial and error. I mean, we used to think, so we've been through a couple of iterations of that beer in particular, and it's not the iteration of the recipe, because you can make a recipe just style. We've got lots of guidance in the books and from what we've learned in school, and we understand how to make a Belgian ale. So that's the base beer. We understand that because that's what we've been taught. What we don't ever know is when we're going to hit the sweet spot on the things like the adjuncts or the berries that we're going to put into it. So there was a period of time when we actually increased the amount of raspberries we put in the beer, thinking, well, obviously more is better. And it wasn't. It was the opposite. It wasn't better. So when we brought it back down and brought it down even a touch lower than we had ever gone, we hit the sweet spot. We had no idea.
And so do you test that with people, or do you guys just drink it yourselves and go like, this is good or bad? Or do you like resell it and we send it out there? We
test it with people. And again, we're always here, literally always here. And we'll go out and talk with people in the tap room, and they'll just say, this is the best batch we've ever had. I just can't believe how good it is. And it's the feedback. It's definitely the feedback. It's the way people buy it, the quantities they buy it in, and the way they tell us, how they feel the beer is doing. We don't actually believe that our palate is the only palate. I know a lot of, chefs and sometimes other brewers as well will think, well, I know. And I always say, I don't know. I know what I like, but I don't assume what somebody else likes unless their feedback is feeding that as proof. I like the data better than the assumption.
One of the other things we talk about is kind of we call it your unfair advantage. And so everybody has an unfair advantage, and very often they don't stop to think about it. It's just something they inherently like, oh, I do this because I know that, or I've been able to take advantage of these different things. And there's these 4 components that you like reflect on to kind of uncover it. It's like, what are you good at? What are you not good at? What are your unique experiences? And maybe not unique in the sense of like no one in the world has ever done this, but like most people haven't. And then the last one, like, what are your values? And so you put all those together and you kind of think about, well, why am I the one who can do this? Because not everybody could do what you do. Not everyone can do what I do. Like everybody's got a different, strength. So when you think about your unfair advantage, you've mentioned a few different experiences. I was a scientist and I did these things. Like, but what do you think makes you unique in able to like pull this off and in able to grow a company like this? Like, it's a loved brand. Like, people really enjoy it. It's busy all the time. Like, how do you, why you? What did you do? How do you get to do that?
I think the only thing I can link it to, and I say this because I don't have marketing background, I don't have business background, I don't have a business degree, I don't have any of the things that should logically take you to the final answer, which should be a successful business. I think I'm a people pleaser.
Mhm.
And I think because I'm a people pleaser, I look for ways to make people happy, whether that's creating the right event, whether it's posting the right post, whether it's sharing and making people feel like they're valued and they matter and that this is their place. I've always said to our crew, the most important thing is you figure out what the best beer experience is for the person that walks through the door, and they'll be here forever. Whether the beer has to be the best beer they've ever had, or they need you to remember who they were, who they are, and what matters to them. Like they told you about their granddaughter last week, or their cousin, or their, whatever it is, they need to know that
Sure.
right? Or if they come in and they don't have a community, you have to make them feel like this is their place. This is where they belong. Because sometimes people are just looking for a place to feel like safe
Mhm.
and like this is where they should be. And I said, when you identify that, that's how you create loyalty. You don't create. It's never about the product. And I believe that wholeheartedly. Don't get me wrong, we try our best to make really great beer. But I know that the connection to what people need to make them feel happy is where that's, to me, is the secret sauce.
Mhm.
And that's something I know because I'm a people pleaser and I'm looking to make people happy.
Mhm. So having that entrepreneurial spirit and having that mix, but also like your husband plays into it as well.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you look at like an unfair advantage, you individually can have one and everybody will have one, but then there's also the collective
For sure.
unfair advantage. So what is like HubTown's unfair advantage? When you put all the pieces together, what is it about that recipe that works?
Well, if you look at the two of us, we always talk about me being the dreamer and him being the doer. So, he will keep in check a lot of my crazy ideas while understanding that some of the crazy ideas are the only reason we stand out.
Hmm.
So he is definitely my equal in terms of hardworking. So the two of us will work our 16 hours in a day. And yeah, we'll complain a whole lot at home when we get home and we're so tired and whatever. But then we get back and we do it again the next day.
Yeah.
So there's no question in my mind that this couldn't be done as a single person on my own or him on his own, because you have to have both pieces, in my opinion, of that puzzle.
Mm-hmm. What about the rest of the team, the rest of the people that work here? How have you assembled this team to be kind of a strength?
Well, and the funny thing about it is, and we kind of talk about it a lot, we don't have a lot of servers.
Mm.
So the people that come and work with us haven't typically worked as servers before. And it's not because we don't respect the value of the experience that they bring in-house. And don't get me wrong, we have one that has been a server and she is spectacularly fast and whatever. But what happens is when we hire our people, we're looking for kind people. We're looking for people who have genuine interest in other people and genuine values. And, which is often, it can be a negative sometimes because it's hard on them when they have to deal with these really difficult things. People with experience in the industry know how to deal with those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they come into it fresh. They've never done it before. And they're going, oh, this is really a little scary, which means our team can be a bit gentle and a bit soft. But that softness, I think, is why people keep coming back, because they feel valued. They feel like these people care about them. And they're going to try their hardest, the same as Mark and I try to make them happy. Our crew tries to make them happy. So I think that's, I know that's how we build the team. And like I said, in every interview, we have the discussion about how you make someone feel good when they're here, because that's the value proposition always. And if they don't understand that value, then they aren't a fit.
Yeah. And I think there's two elements outside of the beer that make up kind of what you guys do here. One is the events. You have we'll ask you about some of the events that you guys run. They're different especially for breweries, but and the other one is the building. And so tell me a little bit about the events, I guess, first, and then I'd love to hear more story. We're literally sitting in a vault, so
yeah.
So I think those two components also play a pretty big part of the mix.
Yeah, it's true. The events in particular, and people always say, it's amazing that you keep coming up with these wild and crazy things. And I say, well, how else do you connect? because you have to give people a reason to go out. Otherwise, they'll stay home, they'll watch TV, they'll take their kids to hockey, and they won't do things that fill that other bucket because not everybody's creative, right? Not everybody's going, well, I should go and plan this really cool thing. So we'll come up with these events to try and get people together. Now, understanding that, what we wanted to do from the very beginning was connect. That was our goal, was connect people. And then we hit COVID. And we still had to figure out how to connect with people from here and into their living rooms. So we understand pretty clearly what people are looking for. At least we think we do. Sometimes the events work, sometimes they don't. But in general, we're looking for something different, something unique. It's not happening everywhere else. If you go to a trivia night at one place and then you come to a trivia night here, you'd see they are wildly different. Because a trivia night at a regular place will kind of follow a script. They'll do things the way they always do things. And when you come to our place, we create every single event uniquely. We have weird and ridiculous, games that get played in the middle of it because we hired someone that had that kind of a mindset. How do we make this different, memorable, give people a chance to create these memories? And that's really what it comes down to. At the end of the day, every time they come and have a positive experience full of memories, again, they feel good. They feel like this is their place. This is where they want to be. And they'll come back and do another one.
And so what are some of the biggest, what are the most successful events that you guys have run?
Well, over the years, we've been building up our Oktoberfest, and that is something that's pretty common everywhere. People do Oktoberfest. That one had gotten pretty big until we actually stopped it this year. We didn't do it in 2024 because everybody was doing an Oktoberfest. So we said, okay, let's just let that go because, we're just going to pillage from each other. And that's not really the goal. Why don't we do something different? How about an end of summer Olympics? Let's do that. And all of a sudden we were doing ridiculous games like Limbo and we're Flip Cup and Giant Jenga and Cornhole and darts and ping pong. We're doing all these things, but we're adding a twist. We're putting glasses on them where they can't really see that well, but they're still throwing the darts at the dartboard. Or we're making them do 2 or 3 spins before they throw a cornhole bag.
Right.
So, that one, I wouldn't say that it was the most popular, but it was different. And it wasn't what everybody else was doing. It was completely unique. People had the greatest time. And it's something where at the end of an event, I want them to go, I can't believe how fun that was. So that one is, I think the Olympic Games, we did the Winter Olympics last winter where we did 3 events. It was the curling out front, the darts upstairs, and ping pong upstairs. And people have been asking, are we doing it again this winter? Because that was so much fun. So I know that one has been a big one, but we've done a lot of weird stuff. Our leagues now, we've got our darts leagues, which was kind of reinvigorated in town because over COVID, everything shut down and they weren't coming back. You saw pool tables went away, dartboards went away. People just stopped that sort of thing. So we brought it back, and now there's dart leagues everywhere. There's, cornhole is starting to happen everywhere. Right now, well, of course, nobody's done our curling, but we get phone calls constantly about how to build their own curling rink in their area so they can get out and do that. So, I know that these things are what people want. People just, it's that experiential economy right now where everybody's looking for an experience. We're done with stuff. So we, try to build these events so that people have like a whole bucket full of memories instead.
So tell me about the building. How did you pick this building? Why did you pick it? It's pretty unique and pretty different. But obviously you have to have space for all the equipment. You have to have a place to sit. So how did you guys pick this and why?
Oh my God. I wish I could say we picked it. I think it picked us. We had 4 or 5 different locations picked out before this place. And all of them had different logic around them. So for craft breweries in particular, they're often in more industrial areas. And that's very, it's on purpose because it's cheaper, right? It's cheaper land. You could get a bigger facility. You can, you have less rules around what you're allowed to do in the manufacturing space. So we actually had, we had 1, 2, 3 places in Okotoks picked out that were in industrial areas first. And those come with a completely different marketing plan, of course, because then you're planning for people who already know that you brew it and they're looking for you. And then we had 2, 3 places that were on this main stretch that we were working on, well, 2, and then this was the very last one. So just understand that every place we tried to go, we just kept finding one barrier after another. It was a no for this reason, a no for that reason. And then one day, and this is one of the stories we tell a lot, because I would say, I think it might be a witch, because we were driving down the street, and understand back then, how long have you been in Okotoks?
Just a year and a bit.
So back when we were driving up this street, I'm going to say it was in 2017, maybe 2016, 2017. I can't remember for sure. We were driving up this road, and downtown Okotoks was dead. It was a bit of a ghost town, and that just was the nature of where things had ended up, because people weren't building in the downtown anymore. Things were getting aged, that sort of thing. And we were driving past this building, and I pointed it out to Mark, and I said, that's where the brewery should be. And he's like, oh, good luck. Like, they've had that place forever. It's Burning Browns, art gallery, furniture, I don't know, whatever it was, all the different things. And I just said, oh yeah, laughed it off. And the next day we took our son out to a concert out in Calgary, out at the UFC. And it was a really weird entrance into the concert. He was a bit young. So he said, well, we'll just, wait till he gets in. We're just going to go to the pub here at the UC campus, because that's Mark's old pub from when he went to school there. And we're having a beer, and we're sitting there waiting to make sure he gets in properly. And I get a message from a friend who said, hey, do you guys want to, because this is back when we're doing like the beer kits, the brew stations. She said, hey, do you guys want to come out and do like a beer tasting at my friend's business? It's the Houbtown Gallery, the one that's downtown Okotoks. And just kind of laughed. And I said, legally, we can't do that. We need to have the right equipment, licensing. And I laughed, and I said, but if they want to give us part of their building for a brewery, let us know. And she said, they want to meet you tomorrow. So that's really how it happened. So the business that was in here was an art gallery for a local artist, Bernie Brown. And they had, I don't know, Western wear, Western style furniture, that sort of thing. And they were just struggling.
Right.
And, they thought they would give up a portion of their space, and maybe that could
rent it out
business, and then we could, move in. So we actually took the lower level and not the upper level. And they moved everything upstairs. And that's kind of how we started.
Yeah, that's great. That is, you might be a witch.
Right? So I say to Mark, I'm like, I got to really be careful about my negativity, because I don't need.
You don't need to bring that in. So we'll wrap up, what's next? Where do you guys see this going? Do you dream of, national distribution and spreading the brand across the country, or where are you guys what's next for HubTown?
Well, yeah, we need to expand our offerings. So right now we're very locally based in terms of where our beer goes. So we do have it here in Okotoks. We have it in Calgary. We do have it all around the province. I've just noticed that probably most of the major cities and the bigger cities in Alberta have us, as well as some of the smaller towns as well. So we're seeing that happen. We're seeing the growth there. But last year we actually went to Japan. So we went on a trade mission to Japan and brought our beer out there in hopes of selling it. And that was quite the experience. So we have some opportunities to maybe start selling into Southern Asia. Wow. And Vietnam. So yeah, for sure. I mean, more beer out to the market is really the goal now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much for chatting, and learned a lot. And yeah, good luck with everything from here on out.
My pleasure.
Well, that's it. My interview with Lisa Watts from HubTown Brewing, the strategy of beer. So, as always, take a look for the companion episode. We'll break down everything Lisa talked about using the strategy of everything tools, and bring out some of those insights that you can then use, apply them to whether you're developing a new product, trying to get close to your customer, or whatever the case may be. We'll find all those things in that episode. I hope you found it entertaining. Hope you learned a few things, and please do us a favor, rate this podcast whatever you think it's worth, like it, share it with a friend. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. They call me DT. That's where you can find me. My name is Dave Thomas. Thanks for joining us again on the strategy of everything.